boys and girls. This is Miss Sheehan from Hillview, and I have another song tale for you. I love this one. This one is called There's a Hole in the Bucket, and it's hilarious. So it's two different characters singing, so I'm going to change my voices so you can hear the two different characters. Okay, here we go. The hole in a bucket. There's a hole in the bucket. So you can see Liza and Georgie. There's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, dear Liza. There's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, a hole. Mend the hole in the bucket, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. Mend the hole in the bucket, dear Georgie, mend it. With what shall I mend it, dear Liza, dear Liza? With what shall I mend it, dear Liza? With what? With a straw, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. With a straw, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, a straw. The straw is too long, dear Liza, dear Liza. The straw is too long, dear Liza, too long. Then cut it, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. Then cut it, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, cut it. With what shall I cut it, dear Liza, dear Liza? With what shall I cut it, dear Liza? With what? With a knife, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. With a knife, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, a knife. The knife is too blunt, dear Liza, dear Liza. The knife is too blunt, dear Liza, too blunt. Wet the knife then, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. Wet the knife then, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, wet it. With what shall I wet it, dear Liza, dear Liza? With what shall I wet it, dear Liza? With what? With a stone, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. With a stone, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, a stone. The stone is too dry, dear Liza, dear Liza. The stone is too dry, dear Liza, too dry. Wet the stone then, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. Wet the stone then, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, wet it. With what shall I wet it, dear Liza, dear Liza? With what shall I wet it, dear Liza? With what? With the water, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. With the water, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, the water. In what shall I get it, dear Liza, dear Liza? In what shall I get it, dear Liza? In what? In the bucket, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. In the bucket, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, the bucket. But there's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, dear Liza. There's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, a hole. Awesome job, boys and girls. There's a couple of weird words in this book. So, well, first of all, it just loops back and around. It's a big joke, right? So then go back to the beginning. There's a hole in the bucket, right? So, obviously don't use knives unless you have a grown-up around. Knife is too blunt. Blunt is a word that means it's not sharp. So you want to sharpen the knife so it can cut things. And then they spell wet here with an H, W-H-E-T. Wet means to sharpen it, and you sharpen a knife on a stone, right? And then you need the stone to be wet in order for it to wet with water in order for it to be sharpened. So you're learning lots of new words in this book too. There's a hole in the bucket. Have a good one.